a buff nerd. He is basically like Sean
Love
in
it.
10 years. Because I don't know if you see.
If
follow
I
him
could
on
be so lucky.
You are that lucky. I am sure of it. I don't know if you
gotta
follow
put
him
on
on
60
Instagram
pounds of lean muscle and we'll get there.
and grow a sweet mustache and fight Tom Cruise in the bathroom.
See, that I'll never get. The Tom Cruise, I'll fight him any day. The mustache, it doesn't get any
You
better
heard
than
it here
his
first,
people.
folks.
He on his Instagram recently did a whole video where he builds his own gaming PC during quarantine. And he like, builds it from scratch.
Wearing that tank top.
Yeah, he's also a huge mini painter. Like he loves painting miniatures. He's into the Brandon Sanderson books. He tweeted or posted pictures of him with the book, like tag Brandon Sanderson. Can't wait for the next one.
Now, can we get Henry Cavill to come play and hang out with us? Is my question.
I
have to fight Tom Cruise for the privilege. Like if I could beat Tom Cruise, then I get access to Henry Cavill.
Collectively, okay. I feel like that's the hierarchy that we have to go through to
so
get
if you guys can be my coaches to get me ready for, because Tom Cruise has always done his own stunts, so he is like he's a final boss is all I'm gonna say. Like
he's a lot shorter than he looks in real life.
Is Henry Cavill the prize in this scenario?
Real quick, yes.
Henry Cavill's the prize. Yes, we're fighting Tom Cruise for Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill is Zelda. Tom Cruise is Ganon and Ganondorf. He has his final form that we haven't seen yet.
Tom Cruise, I'll remind you, is powered by Scientology. So he's got that coursing through his veins, or not coursing through his veins. I don't know if they remove something or they add something, but he is powered by extra natural forces.
Can we just like imagine a universe?
He's not weighed down by ghosts like the rest of us.
Exactly.
Just imagine a universe in which we're sitting around a table and Henry Cavill is playing with us, because like that's the kind of things that I want for Blackwater. I want us to have fancy friggin' wonderful guests come in.
It's not a joke. I'm working on it. And I can't, now that we're live, I can't say in any
I know you can't talk about it because we've talked about it off stream.
No, not this most recent thing. But I'm working on it.
I personally would love to see a future where we play with more esoteric guests who people wouldn't naturally expect us to play with. Like, can you maybe one of maybe Barack Obama? No one would see that coming. They'd be like,
call us anytime, Barack.
He's not an actor.
What class does Barack play?
Paladin.
He's a paladin, 100%.
He's a paladin.
Come
for
on,
sure.
easy.
I feel like he might pull a tricky on us and be a rogue just for fun. Like, because here's the thing, he's a paladin.
I want that for him. Like, I want him to explore that in himself.
It's not who is Barack, who does Barack want to play? Like, wild magic sorcerer. I feel like he's just like, you know what?
Arcane trickster rogue. We want him to play a paladin. Barack would play an arcane trickster rogue just to be like, that's great. Yeah, I'd be into that.
It would be heartbreaking to me if he did like this min-maxed like sorcerer paladin, like he's just all about dishing damage. And I'm like, no.
Speaking of min-maxing, that's actually probably a really nice segue into talking about what we're gonna talk about tonight. We should probably roll that intro, maybe? Yeah.
Oh yeah, we should roll that.
Yeah, let's roll that intro.
And that would be great. I'm just stalling a little because sometimes we pull the rug out from under Cody. Here we go. All right, here we go. Let's do it. Roll that intro. Here we go. That intro's coming. Oh, there it is. And here it goes. Bwah, 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 fuck. There's just two. Nice. Today I learned there's not 3 Bueninis.
Sean is like
there's
the
4,
man.
all in all. Oh, there's something. Look, we'll talk about it in fucking character types or personality types. But I realized there are dialects of scat, and that's hilarious to me. Because like
different languages have different scat.
Yeah, like what's his name? Bright Eyes. Frank Sinatra was very like like it was a lot of D's and W's and V's and the occasional B. And then like some scat folk are like skibbity scat skully scat. There's a lot of SK, like a lot of SKLs. And then you get people like, I don't know if this is traditional scat, but like my favorite scat person is fucking Jack Black. Like fucking Wonder Boy, Riggy-goo-goo. Like Riggy-goo-goo is the greatest scat anyone's ever come up with. And like, I'm gonna call those scatological dialects. Nope, we can't use that word.
No,
Fuck.
no, you
I was
cannot.
gonna warn our watchers to please not search scat dialects or
No.
scat people, scat person.
No.
Don't do any of those things.
This is the problem when you make up words based on etymological rules, as often as
Yes.
I do, is sometimes you run into stuff that technically already exists and is a sex thing. And you're like, fuck.
You know,
God
it's
damn it, they got
surprising
there
how
before
much
me.
stuff
Just
ends
trip
up being a
into
sex
stuff.
thing.
Yeah. In some corner of the internet, somebody's thought about it.
Which is a
Cool.
great transition into
Queen of the segue.
weird, fun sex stuff and role playing. Let's get into it.
Well, no, we're gonna talk. I think I've got on the books an episode.
Wait.
Sponsors. Thank you so much.
Sponsors.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Sponsors.
much.
We're professionals.
We're professionals.
We've
and
done
is
this
what we do.
before.
100%. 100%. This is our first day.
You guys, Cody's here and it's
guys.
falling apart, so there's no excuses today.
No. This is chatWater. We perpetually fall apart. We only really truly fall apart in the main show when Cody's not there. So thank you so much, Cody, for being back. We loved you. We love you and we missed you.
I wanted to say I was a little hurt because I've missed one main show and nothing fell apart. And then Cody was gone and I was like, it'll be fine. And then everything fell apart. And I was like, am I not needed? And Cody's needed? I had a real existential crisis. But it's okay because Cody came back and everything's fine now.
Balance has
don't
been
leave us
restored to the
again,
universe. Our sponsors, a big thank you to Legendcraft and Silverwing Armory, our two fantastic sponsors who have partnered with us to help us do this wonderful thing we do. Please head on over to their website, and if anything tickles your fancy, you can enter the code Blackwater for a discount at checkout. That supports these wonderful Canadian companies, and also a little bit comes to support us as well. So head on over and check out their websites. On our main campaign, you can also see like ads for them at the break. We've been chatting with them a lot, and there's going to be some fun stuff coming down the pipe from them. Also, a big thank you to Keisha at Fairy Dragon Dice. We just got our dice in on Saturday, and they are so beautiful. I cannot stop looking at my Neppy dice. I want more. I want like so many of them. I want earrings. I want a necklace. I want all of these things. So please go check out Fairy Dragon _ Oh, so good, Sean.
Wait. You got to get the whole thing covered. So folks, no, you keep talking. I'm just going to be a visual aid.
Fairy Dragon _ Dice on
Focus on
Instagram. She does shop updates maybe once or twice every other month. Please, like, if you are lucky enough to get any of her stuff, you are in fantastic hands. She also sometimes does custom commissions and opens those every now and again. Also, a big thank you as always to our campaign artist Tiana, who provides all the artwork. She did those wonderful little sketches of Sean and myself and Yanis. It's down for me, over for Sean. I don't know. But if you are an artist and you ever want to do art of anybody in Blackwater or anything, please, we would love that. Send it to us. We will include it in our scroll. Like we love art. We love art. And I think that was one of the things when we first started streaming. We're like, art is good.
That's all we've ever wanted out of this.
All we've ever wanted. I think
it's why I got into acting. Just full stop. Is I'm a fan artist.
I want people to draw me.
Yeah.
Guys, I like framed the first piece of fan art I got. It was for fucking Deadly Class.
Yes.
And it's
amazing.
Great. I mean, it's not technically great, but it's great for me.
All of the fan art that we ever have of like anything Blackwater is up in my house. Like I have framed copies of everything. My office at work, I have all of my D&D art on the wall. And when people come in, they're like, "What is that?" I was like, "Don't worry about it. It's for me, not for you." But we love art here. So if you are an artist or you are creative in any way and want to send that our way, blackwaterd&d@gmail.com, and we will for sure feature that and talk about it and gush and probably cry a little bit. That'll be.
I will say this in relation to our little doodles, portraits down at the bottom. Is I was deep in a pandemic beard when she got those drawn. So every time I'm clean shaven on this show, I'm like, I'm not like, I'm not matching the advertising,
Yes.
And so whenever I get just a little bit of scrubs, I'm like, oh, thank God.
I'm back. I match. My hair was so much shorter in the photo that she did from that, but here we are. So yeah, those are our sponsors and all of that good stuff. I don't know about you, Sean, but I want to play campaign like now. I was like the second after session ended on Saturday, I was like, we have to play again very quickly because I don't know. I love dungeon delving, and I'm very excited for next session. Definitely left us on a cliffhanger.
I feel like this one in particular is like, it's a dungeon delve, which is great, and you have that sort of momentum that the dungeon delves have. But I feel like this is also really like a big sort of key setup for our next arc. Whether it is or not, it has that feel of like we're discovering like the next calamity or the next big issue. And that's very exciting because, you know, Task is gonna be.
That's terrifying. That's terrifying. It's just not good. It's just like a whole big realm of not good. And
Also, the NPC that Tim had on last week, the little guy you guys ran into,
the kobold Rico.
Yeah, so good, so good. Like instantly a favorite.
I have had a thought that's too dumb to share at the actual table.
This is where we share it, Sean.
This is where we share dumb thoughts.
Task, because one of the things that is canonically been established is Letters is interested in the way in which deities gain their power, and you know whether us mortals can hijack that in a way, or at least rather than giving our the point is that Task has proven that the amalgamation of wealth can lead to godhood, and so you're all like, ha ha ha, protect corporate interests. How do you defeat the god of wealth? You get fucking richer, baby. If Letters can run his businesses fucking primo,
my God.
Letters becomes Jeff Bezos and kills God. Like that is.
I'm pretty sure Jeff Bezos is Task.
Okay,
we're gonna
then
drop comparison. Actually, hold on. Twitch is owned by Amazon. Jeff Bezos is the hero. Let's move on quickly.
Let's move on quickly
before we're canceled off of Twitch.
Yes, we're banned from Twitch forever.
Just get richer than Task and then punch him to death.
Yeah, that's something has been so cool for me to watch as Tim's partner, who just watches him plan. He has been planning like every night for the last weeks, and he just like all of his free time, like while our toddler naps and when he's not doing other work and in evenings, is all just like blah, 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 just like typing away and planning. And he'll all of a sudden I'll just look over and he'll just go, and he'll just get so excited, and I'm like, what have you done? What did you do now? And then he'll look at me and he's like, I really want to tell you this thing and I can't. And I was like, you asshole, that is so rude. Like you just keep telling like all these things I want to tell you, but I can't. And I'm
that's
like,
the DM's burden.
I guess so.
You play with all your friends, and so you have no one to talk to.
Well, no, he shared some of the stuff with me, and a lot of times when he does, I'm like, I don't know how you want me to react to this. Like, it's super cool, but I don't know enough to critique your work. And he's like, no, I just want to share. No one to share with. And I'm like, yeah, you share away, man. I'll be
for
here.
For the longest time, me and my brother would always play together. One of us would be the DM or whatever, and one the other. And it's only recently that now we're both playing independently in different campaigns.
So nice.
And so now we can just like peek behind each other's DM screen and like just gush and like, this is what my players did, this is what actually happened, and so like most of the time we're like, all right, let's catch up about life, like we're grown-ups now, let's talk about it. And it'll be like 2 hours, we just walk around Trout Lake about 12 times, and it's just D&D, like, and it, anyways, speaking of which, what type of player am I don't know. Is there like some sort of magazine quiz I can take?
Well, I also want to say,
does Cosmo have how to spice up your love life, and what
through
gamer
D&D,
type are you?
I also want to shout out a big thank you to the fans out there who did participate in our little science survey. I did look at your responses. Thank you so much for that. Have tabulated some data. And so once we talk through, put it this way, if we get through player archetypes and styles this evening, I will be a happy lore keeper. We may not even touch on GM stuff tonight, and that is okay. I have planned for that, but if we get through player stuff, I will be happy. So player archetypes and styles, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So this is like, I think a lot of times player styles and archetypes often get a bit of a bad rap, and they often are always connoted negatively. Like people will talk about, oh, power gaming this, or oh, like like power gaming is often a big one that comes up, and you might be like, what's a power game? And I'm like, let me tell you, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And so I really want to like try and dismantle a lot of the stuff around player archetypes, because I think we have to first talk about it in a sense of group dynamics. So we talked about group dynamics like a while back when we talked about like how groups form, the forming, storming, norming, performing kind of arc of a group. So when we think about the stages of group development, we often talked about how there's sometimes player styles and archetypes that play well together and some that don't. And when they don't play well together, that's when storming happens. But when you get a group that either like works through the storming and is actually able to sit and, get to that place of norming and then eventually performing, all of those kind of, everyone just starts to like play nicely with each other. So maybe tonight, if you are in a D&D group and you fashion yourself as one of these, or that there are a couple of these folks in your group, might be some tips on how to play nice with everyone in your group and make your group run a bit better so that you can get to that stage of, so you're not storming all the time, which is pretty nice. And also, I also want to preface too that these are like boxes but they are not be all end alls. They are categories. You cannot capture the way that a person plays in like one category. People often have traits of multiple things, but these are the big archetypes. And if we get to DM styles and DM archetypes tonight, fantastic as well.
And Sean and I haven't done our job properly.
Then you haven't done your job properly, right? So first we're going to be talking about styles versus archetypes. So style talks about the way that you interact. What, Sean?
Sorry, I just have to say, I was going to make a joke about derailing things, but even that joke was going to be too derailing and I'd have to yes and it. So now I just have to comment on that I had to make a joke, and this is my equivalent of a joke, because otherwise it'll be too derailing, and I genuinely want to get into this.
One of those quizzes you had us take, told us like whether we're like a beginner or a advanced or whatever level of player.
That one was the ones that I just sent you guys. I didn't actually send those ones to our
group. Yeah, I did that one I think 4 times to try and not get beginner player. And it kept giving me beginner. And there was a point where I was like, this stupid quiz, I've been playing for years. What does it know? And I'm like, what do I have to pick to not get beginner? And every time, beginner. I swear it's rigged. Does everyone get
rookie
beginner?
Move.
Did you get beginner?
Mine was like, you should probably make your own fucking game. Like, sorry, are you Gary Gygax? And I was like, yeah, I am. I'm reincarnated. Welcome back. Thank you.
It's like the Dalai Lama. You do that test, and if you answer the questions right, you're appointed the next Gary Gygax.
That's how things work.
Gygax does sound like a title.
It does.
It's always shocking to me that was his actual
Gygax.
name.
Head Gygax, yeah.
Head
Oh
Gygax.
my God. Sorry, I just got to say, it's one of my favorite books I own. You know that Gary Gygax released a book called Gary Gygax's Book of Extraordinary Names? Because you know how like DMs are always like, oh, what's his name? I don't know. And Gary Gygax, it's like 150 pages long. They're like big pages. And it's just like, Middle English? Yeah, here's male names, female names, gender neutral names, family names, like,
I love
what? Zulu names? Yeah, same thing. Oh, fictional names? Yeah, absolutely. You want to roll for fictional names? What do you want it to sound? Guttural, smooth? Like, it's
wow.
The best. And as a person who's bad with naming, both in D&D and like my written stuff, it's always great where I was like, oh, what the fuck do I want to name this person? To the Extraordinary Book of Names.
I'm a big fan of Fantasy Name Generator online. I don't know if anyone's used that. It is maintained by one person. I think her name is Emily. And she has a little bio that is like on one tiny little page. And she just like inputs stuff. And it's like you can just randomize and click a bunch of things. Like that is where all of like a lot of names in anything with D&D that I do come from. Is from there. I'm like, ooh, tiefling name generator. Like that's not where Nepentha's name came from, but a lot of like other names of tieflings. I was like,
I truly believe like there are a few things that remind me that there are angels in the world, and there are websites out there which are extremely useful that everyone uses that are maintained by like one person.
Yes.
Like the random name generator is one. There's a great like Canadian COVID number like place that they keep track of everything. And it's just maintained by like one dude in BC who started it when it all started, so people get numbers, and now it's like the thing everyone uses, and it's just one guy. And there's like a thing at the bottom where it's like buy me a cup of coffee, and you can like send him a couple bucks for all the work he does, and that's literally it. It's ad free. And I'm like,
so nice.
I'm like, there are people out there who do all this work. Just
Support small creators.
It's awesome.
Support small creators doing stuff.
Definitely. Go use Fantasy Name Generator. Blow up our site with our 18 viewers.
Yeah, it's
blow
great.
up our site.
So style versus archetype. So a style talks about how you interact with the game system, whether that's the rules, the world, or the mechanics of the game. And an archetype talks about how you interact socially, generally with like other players, the GM, or other social entities like NPCs and stuff like that. So I want to talk about this kind of stuff in the context of, I'm going to throw in some psychology theory, as I am wont to do, something called family systems theory. So family systems theory is helpful when we think about D&D because the group interacts with each other on the level of closeness, intimacy, and emotionality within the system that is often at the level reserved for family members. So like the safety and the safe space for exploration to like cry and to experience like multitudes of emotions and know that you're not going to be like judged or persecuted for those in a D&D game. If you're privileged enough to be in one that is quite safe and that you feel comfortable in, is often reserved for family, is the level of like emotionalness that's there. And you can't play without safety. You cannot role play and you cannot like explore a world without feeling safe in it. And violations that come from strong emotional consequence, like say if somebody feels quite betrayed or invalidated in a D&D group, there can be big emotional blowout, not only just for the players who are involved, but also the characters. And that's that bleed concept that we talked about before. So family systems theory, very important when we think about group dynamics. So some of the key elements of family systems theory that are important to think about are who is in the group, the members that are involved, and what are they like personality wise, which is a little bit about what we're talking about today. Beliefs, what do people think about the group, think about the game, what kind of experience do they have with it in the past, their roles, like what do they do within the group, not only as a player but also as party member. Like I know for a long time, well, basically since this is Yanis started coming on board with us, we always joke about Yanis is our dad. That is Yanis's a role in essence, is like we put Yanis in a parental figure position. That's us as a group member doing that. So that's kind of a thing about family systems there too. Assets, what is gained by being involved in this group? Limitations, what's lost by being involved in the group? What does like goals? What does the group? What groups like? What are the goals that the group has in and out of game? I think about like goals that we have as a group for our stream. That is a goal that we have out of stream collectively that we share. And then there's also like in game, what do we want? We want to have really awesome role play. We want like have fun. We want to have like, good storytelling and all that kind of stuff. So those are all goals that we have. Boundaries. What is shared? What is private? Between whom? So like then that also plays into like subsystems of who is aligned with other people. Think in our group too, we have two couples in our group, myself and three.
Sean and Adam.
I was just going to say they are the third couple, yes, because they're roommates. So they form a subsystem, like Tim and I are a subsystem, Jen and Matt are a subsystem, but then you also have subsystems like Len, Jen, and myself are also very, very close friends. And then even chatWater itself is a subsystem. So the fact that we do this together without the other group, that creates a subsystem here. So it plays into like alliances, and we may be more inclined to either align ourselves or oppose ourselves with people from different systems. So that all plays into like personality and style as well. And then the environment, like what features of larger systems are we involved in? So like we're part of the Vancouver D&D community. And that's not like even before we got out of playing in my living room, essentially we were technically part of the Vancouver D&D community. So we're influenced by like D&D that happens in Vancouver.
Oh gosh, is it just me?
Influence.
Oh, okay.
I
froze, but
No.
everyone else was fine.
M got stuck there for a second.
Oh, am I back?
Got stuck. We are members of the Vancouver community, the Vancouver D&D community.
I'm going to turn off the Wi-Fi on my phone. That's probably one of the things that is not helping. I don't need that.
Get out of here, phone Wi-Fi.
Get out of there, phone Wi-Fi. So we're part of the Vancouver D&D community. So whether we're playing in our living room or playing in a game store or playing in a pub or whatever, like the D&D that we play is influenced by D&D happening in Vancouver and like Canada and North America as a whole, we can't not be influenced by Critical Role. Like we can't not, because it is part of the larger D&D community, and we're also part of the Twitch D&D community. So the way that D&D is played on Twitch influences the way that we play. It does, because it can't not. And then there's also bigger systems like North American D&D or role play or gaming versus something like European or like Nordic role play or gaming. So we're involved in like much bigger systems than we actually might anticipate. So all of those things influence player styles and archetype.
Hell yeah.
So that's the shit that's
question.
going on in the background. Yes.
It's a derailing question.
Hell yeah. Lobsters.
When
What's
they
with that?
play-
Always, please do it.
When they play D&D in a different country, like say you're playing D&D in France and you're playing in French, D&D is quite commonly known for people doing accents. Do they do accents in French? Like, will they speak French like an English person would speak French? Or would they speak
100%.
French
I can
like a
imagine
German
so.
person would speak? Like, do they put accents on their French?
Yeah.
Dude, this
Yeah.
is my favorite fact of like, oh, accents are different in different languages. Lumiere, Beauty and the Beast, right? He's the sexy French he's not a lamp. He's a fucking candelabra.
Yes.
Ooh. And so he's like the sexy womanizing candelabra. And so he's French in every single language they translate it into, they dub it in, he's French.
Except France.
Except France.
What is he?
You know what they make him? Italian. Because it's like cultural perceptions. It's like, if you can't be French, who's the next most like passionate, like womanizing? And so they go with Italian. And so like
in Zootopia,
mhm.
they actually change the animals.
Yeah, the moose
Yes.
versus the
It's the like instead of Peter
TV
Mansbridge,
hosts.
it's Peter Moosebridge.
Yeah.
Which is just a delight for me. I think that's good. Yeah, and so all of that, like, also I would really encourage you folks too that like if you're ever curious about what D&D is played like in different languages, there are tons of different streams on
There
Twitch.
are people who stream in different languages?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's
I
a
won't
really good
understand, but I
French.
should go check
There's
it
a
out.
really good French one that I saw. I don't remember the name of it. There's a bunch that are in Spanish. There's some that are in Russian. There's some that are played like across Eastern Europe. They're great. Please go check out other streams that are in different languages. They're great.
Yeah, and it's an answer to your question. Even if you don't speak the language, it's so crazy to hear people in a different language doing an impersonation, like doing an accent. Because I know French well enough to know that I can hear fucking French people speaking French with like a bad British accent.
Yes.
And it's like so satisfying for me. I don't know why, but I'm like, oh, it's bad. It's a bad English accent. Oh, that's great. I love that.
Well, and I think it's also important to like decentralize, like, or to also remember that like D&D is not just a North American game played in English. Sure, it was originally started in English, but
Gary Gygax.
with Gary Gygax, thank you so much. But like the game has spread all across. There's a fantastic Instagram that I follow that he just shows different D&D books from all over the world. Like he has collections of stuff that is in Japanese and Korean, and like D&D is such a widespread game. So it's important to remember that the way that we play is influenced by greater like sociocultural milieus that we don't actually think about a lot. So that's important, and that influences the way that people play, and also sociocultural things that are going on at the time influence the way that people play too. There's some really oh gosh, okay, now here we go. I'm derailing it. I'm derailing this.
Well, we're never getting anywhere.
Never getting anywhere. There's some really interesting research that has come out of D&D that is played in prisons.
Mm.
And it talks about the way that D&D is played there is often more, it often starts out quite combat based, and it often like is strictly combat with very little narrative and very little role play. But as the games go on, depending on who is facilitating or who is teaching, it often arcs and changes, and then role play kind of comes out later when safety is established between the group, which is really, really cool. Please, if you're a big nerd or even a little bit of a nerd, go read research about D&D. It's cool.
And if you don't like reading like me, check out a lot of the panels that Game to Grow
Yes.
have
So
set up.
good.
They've got whole panels just about this.
Yeah, it's so
And
great.
on
Because
Facebook,
words are
there's
tough when there's a lot of them.
Words are tough when there's a lot of them.
on Facebook, there's a D&D group that Em and I are part of. I think others might be part of it too, but I think Em and I are most active in it. But Em posted the other day, oh, you should join the therapists D&D group. And I was like, there's a therapists D&D group? I was like, do you need to be a therapist to get in? Because I'd love to know what the hell is you guys talk about.
So I guess I haven't really talked about my career much on stream, but yes, very broadly, I am a therapist. I work and I do therapy. So yeah, I'm actually an admin in that group. So I was one of the creators of that group.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's so cool.
Have done a couple podcast interviews about using RPGs in therapy. So, well, cat's out of the bag now. So maybe I'll throw up one of those on our Instagram. Anyway, talking about styles and archetypes, they can actually quite affect group cohesion and prompt periods of storming if it's in conflict with the rest of the group. And that's like, not to say that you should have a group that's all one style. That would actually probably be pretty awful unless you're. We'll get there. chatWater, we'll get there. But everyone's styles and archetypes needs to play well together. And it's important in considering player and player dynamics. So like what kinds of players you have in the room, but also player to GM dynamics because of the power differential. GMs automatically have more power because they have agency and autonomy to say no. If the GM imposes something on the players, like players do often have some agency, especially with good relationships between the GM and the player to say no and help affect change, especially if they don't like something. But at the end of the day, sometimes the GM's ruling is law, and that's just how it goes. So it's about power and autonomy and agency and group dynamics. Anyway, so we're going to talk first about player styles, and this plays into the quiz that y'all took, which told you whether you were a socializer, an achiever, an explorer, or a killer. So I'm actually going to share screen and I'm going to show you something. Let's see if I can. All right.
What were those options again? Killer, socializer,
achiever, or explorer.
Or explorer.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share screen.
Forget what I got.
All right. So we have some wonderful data here. Thank you all so much for filling this in for me. So on average, the people who have responded have been playing 11.7 years. Most of them are currently playing 5e. Most of them are all playing in a game, and most of them are either players or both. So on average, our group tends to be split between explorers and socializers, with very few people coming in with any percentage in killer and then achiever following close behind. And so we should talk about what that is, but I thought this didn't surprise me at all. The fact that the people who watch our show and also partake in our show, some of our players have responded to this, are explorers and socializers. That makes sense to me. So I'm going to stop sharing screen and we're going to talk a bit about what that means. Okay. Oh my gosh, I have so many tabs open. All right. So this research is actually like psychological research that originally talked about how people play MMORPGs. Or like big RPG systems. So mostly done on computer, but they actually translate quite well to D&D. And this is called the Bartle Taxonomy of play. So this system has flaws and cannot be taken as a be all end all. I will say that up front, but it provides some good insight as the way that people play RPGs. Good conceptualization, not a hard and fast ruling. I'm going to screen share one more time just to show you something here. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. So this is the Bartle Taxonomy. We have two axes. We have players versus the world. So whether that people are more player oriented or people are more world oriented. And then we also have that's the Y axis, the up down one. And then on the X axis, which is the horizontal one, we have interacting versus acting. So whether you're interacting with things or whether you're kind of just doing your own thing over here. So socializers interact with players. Killers very broadly act on players. Explorers interact with the world. Achievers act on the world. So that's the taxonomy. It is a 4-category system, not perfect, but it's a good start. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about each of those things. Yes, Yanis.
So like the killer, would that be sort of like
Yes.
your stereotypical murder hobo group where they kill everything they run into? Or I'm just trying to get an idea of what exactly a killer would look
So
like.
let's talk about, we'll talk about most prominent to least. We'll go most prominent to least prominent because that probably makes more sense that way. So 80% of people who play RPGs generally are socializers. So they experience fun in games through interacting with social entities, whether that's NPCs or the PCs. They're really happy to collaborate in order to achieve bigger and better things than they could on their own. And they're the last ones to be competitive about anything, but that doesn't mean they lack ambition. It's often mean that their goals are intertwined more with the group than individualistic. And these are the players that are like more interested in meeting the bartender and talking to them rather than the quest that they're giving out. Yeah. So
hey, how's your night going? No, like,
please
really?
tell me all about your life and history.
I'm gonna derail us real quick.
Please derail.
Nothing is better than asking a DM a question, like an innocuous question, like, "Hey man, how are you?" "Oh, I'm good." "No man, how are you?" And if you just ask them, then the DM always takes the bait, and now you've got a quest to like help this fucking barkeep with his like divorce. Like,
yes. Well, DMs generally quite like socializers because they're often like they spur really great role play moments. While they may not advance the story, they often create really awesome social interactions that can actually help party engagement and help the party grow together, and often help the DM can throw in story hooks or story through like plot stuff through the social interaction that maybe you didn't stumble upon this mine on the way, but maybe this character that you're talking to lost somebody in that mine collapse. So it creates a really nice social avenue. And if you have a lot of socializers at the table, it's really good to lean into that. Because pushing socializers away from social interaction and into quest-based stuff is not helpful. They will derail you by going and talking to Boblin the Goblin rather than doing anything else. So important to remember with socializers. Socializers can also be broken down into two subclasses. Networkers, they assess who is socially like worth hanging out with, and friends who simply enjoy the company of other social entities in the game, like PCs or NPCs. I feel like Letters is a bit of both. He assesses who's worth hanging out with, but he also just enjoys company.
oh yeah, it's whatever builds the corporate interest.
Whatever
he has to
builds
kill
the corporate
God.
interest. Right, yes. So then we have achievers who make up about 10%, just around 10% of players. And they experience fun in games by making progress and gaining points and stats. They love leveling up and milestones. They want bigger and better gear. They like to finish quests and adventures just to go on to the next thing. So a really good way to, like achievers will not necessarily do so much with the social interaction. They could take it or leave it. But if the social interaction is in service of them fulfilling a quest, yes. Oh, I have to talk to this person because it's part of the bigger quest. Great. That person's not part of the quest. I don't want to do it. So they're more interested in like acting on the world rather than dealing with people generally. So these can be thought of as planners who set goals and aims to achieve, whether group or individually, and opportunists, people who tend to stumble into things to do and then finish them and then find things to do in the game. Explorers are often in the other 10%. And they want to know everything about the world. Like you have to describe rooms in really good detail because they want to go touch everything. They want to poke around. They want to figure stuff out. No room is left uninvestigated. No area is left unexplored. They like discovering new things and new secrets that could be hiding in these areas. And the potential for like hidden surprise is almost their like raison d'etre. They need to explore the world. They want to find a library in every city that they're in. They need a bookstore. They need all of these kind of things. And they're going to go do these things regardless of what the quest is. They're going to go explore the world. So these can be further broken down into like scientists who are methodological in their acquisition of knowledge. So they often plan about how they're going to go get all of this information, or will like strategically investigate. Say it's a dungeon or something. They'll strategically investigate all of the rooms and will never leave anything touched, or they're a hacker. They often have intuitive understandings of the world and how it works. Maybe this is based on their knowledge of the DM, or maybe this is based on the knowledge that they're just intuited about the world, and they don't test ideas, they just go and do it. But they always like to explore. So
Scientist, hacker.
Scientists and hackers.
Dope.
And then we get to killers, who are under 1% of players generally. And they're similar to achievers in which they get in their enjoyment in games from points and status, but they're different in that their drive is often to see other beings or entities lose. So they need to gain points and status, but it comes at the expense of other social beings.
Grape nub. Yeah.
Yeah, grape nub. They're super competitive, very much highly so, and winning the game, however you do that, is the most important thing in the game for them. And they fall into two subcategories: politicians with aims to get a big good reputation, or griefers who aim to get a big bad reputation. So that's the Bartle Taxonomy. And a lot of people have aspects of all of them, which is why they had you take the that test where you were like 60% this thing, 50% this thing. So you have aspects of all of them in you as a player, but often one of them is more prominent than the others. So there's implications for that when you get a lot of these different people at the table, and it has big connections to group dynamics in the way that people interact with each other. So like socializers, for example, can get frustrated by other players who avoid or miss talking to NPCs regardless of their importance to the story, and will often like pull other people into social interactions that they may not want to be involved in. So that could aggravate other people against the socializer, causing group dysfunction. Achievers can get antsy and bored if the story is slower paced due to more role play or key events that are spread farther apart. So that's something that of achievers, because it's not necessarily like these key events don't happen like bam, 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 bam. They're not able to go from point A to point B to point C to point D in their quest or their adventure. Explorers don't like when particular places or events are left undealt with or not interacted with. So if you know that there's this big, festival heading off in this town over here, and the party all wants to not go there, that would completely aggravate an explorer, because they would want to go.
Or if you had a money hole for like a year and a half that you guys just never went in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's that. I don't know if anyone is an explorer prominent in our party, but that might have been something that was a little bit uncertain for some people. And then killers often have difficult times at tables if they're not surrounded by other killers or achievers. These players tend to really thrive in combat and stats-oriented campaigns where player versus player meddling is welcomed and encouraged. Other play styles often have little patience for killers, and they can make for sources of storming in the party. But that's not to like shit all over people who have a more killing-oriented playing style. It's just means that they might have a difficult time finding a group that supports them.
I think the key takeaway there is killers play well with other killers and achievers, and that most certainly has been my experience. And
yes.
I mean, bringing back to min-maxing, I remember I briefly sort of guested in I think I've talked about it on the stream before, a group of like engineers who were like game designers for EA or some shit. I don't fucking know. And so like it was all like stats and puzzles and like every room was like a combat encounter or a very technical puzzle that was like, no, you just have to use your actual brain to fix this.
Yeah.
And they were having a gas, and I was like, fuck, you guys are having so much fun. I don't want to come down on this, but I was like, this is not my jam. I love that you guys are having a great time. I'm going to remove myself.
And I think that that's the really important thing to remember too, is that you can show up to a table and you can realize that like maybe the table just isn't the right one for you. And there is nothing wrong with being like, you know what, this is not my play, like this is not my jam. My play style here doesn't necessarily fit in with other people's play styles. It is super okay to remove yourself from that situation, because there will be another table that will support you. And I'd encourage, like, if anyone is out there wondering like, I wonder what kind of player I am, or maybe I'm not super feeling comfy at the table I'm playing at, consider how you exist at the table, and maybe consider the styles of the people around you. If there's a big mismatch, maybe something to consider for the way, because this stuff should be fun. D&D always should be bucket filling, not bucket tipping. Like, it should always be enjoyable and it should feel safe. So if you're not supported or your style is not supported at the table, might be time to find a new table.
Yeah. But there's also like I think that this is an important thing, is like there's no wrong way to play D&D, and I think people get caught up in like, well, that's not how you play D&D, and it's like, as long as you're enjoying it, and as long as the people you're playing with enjoy it, you could forget half the rules. That's
Totally.
the core aspect of D&D is role playing and having fun. So whatever that looks like for you.
Absolutely.
It's like when you said like killers like generally like fucking with each other's characters and whatnot. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess there's tables where that is somehow acceptable.
Yeah,
because like
for sure there is.
Nothing will make my eyes roll back further into my head than like the cheeky rogue who steals from other players and no one ever sees them because they have fucking 28,000 in stealth.
Or like someone who goes into, you know, all of the rooms first and picks up all the stuff and is like, oh, there's nothing here. Like,
yeah, and we just have to believe them, but we as players know they're fucking lying.
Well, that kind of stuff can cause dissent and like huge rifts between people, like players at the table, because, you know, sure, the characters believe them because their deception was so high and maybe their insight was low, but that creates an ego bleed, right? Like, so you're more likely as a player to be like, well, my character doesn't trust that person's character now because of what they did. And that also speaks to alibi as well, which is what we talked about when we talked about bleed. People would be like, that's just what my character would do. So people often fall on that when they don't feel comfortable at the table, which is something I've really like figured out from talking to people about the way that they play, you know, like that justification of, oh, it was just what my character would do, signals to me that you're feeling the need to like validate yourself for your actions, and might not need to be the case if this is a comfortable table for you to play at. So those are kind of play styles, and that's kind of how people interact with the world. Now we can kind of shift a little bit to talking about player archetypes. So archetypes are also broad strokes categories for the way that players interact socially in games, and unfortunately a lot of these are framed quite negatively. So I've tried to I read a bunch of journal articles this week and just kind of like picked a bunch of stuff and tried to really like frame this. So let's talk about how we best engage these types of players, what they can contribute, potential problems that they run into, they go well with other types of characters, and maybe people they don't go well with. So that this is also, if you're a DM or if you're at a table, maybe you can kind of think about this. Was actually really interesting to think about the way that I play, because I embody a lot of different aspects too. Definitely not as strict as these categories. So this was the quiz that told you whether you were like an actor or a storyteller or a thinker and stuff like that. So those are these ones there. So we'll start with the actor. So the actor is often interested in personality, background, and interaction. Mechanics of the game are often restrictive and prefer rules light systems. Like if they never had to roll dice for a consummate actor, this would be perfect. They would be like,
no, was good though.
I love that. Yes. Well, maybe you're not totally a consummate. Maybe there's other things that are like quite.
Look, I'm not just one thing. Don't try to put me in your fucking box.
It's not my box. This is just a box that's out there. So actors are best engaged by allowing space for them to like write and create their own backstory that might impact the world in some way. Social encounters, recurring NPCs that they can build relationships with, plot elements that involve background and backstory. And I know Sean, and one of Sean's favorite things about D&D is creating relationships with NPCs. That's not necessarily just romantic relationships, but like friendships and business partnerships. I don't know if you've noticed at this point, but Letters does that a lot, and I love it. I think
it is true. I love building empires.
Well, it's like, and you can always correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but it seems like that's like a lot of a place where you get a lot of enjoyment about that, is because you get to kind of like, you get to grow and you watch these NPCs grow around you too.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's just like fucking. Well, what it is, you know what it really is. It's my inability to not to it's two things. It's a real vicious cycle of like needing to needing to ask the bartender, no, how are you really? And then someone does that, and then I have to like, okay, now that like fucking, let's just say Tim is like, oh yeah, I'm having a really hard time with my son, he didn't get into grad school. Like, now I have to honor that. I can't just let something be that. And then once I've gone to the effort of that, I can't just let that be a thing, because now we've had a setup. Now we need to have a payoff. Like,
of course.
Like, now that I put so much fucking shit into Grape Nub and like Tad and shit, like if they were just like, yeah, and and Grape Nub lived a happy life and we never saw her again, that fucking grinds my jimmies, like, as a storyteller. Like, I can't allow that. And so yes, and then it's like anytime I need something, it's like, ooh, who do I know for that? And that's the fun thing, like playing this fucking game long enough, when fucking Kokanee was like, oh yeah, I need someone to teach me how to steal things. I'm like, I have a guy for that. Like, at this point, I don't need to create any more NPCs, because my web is rich enough. I have somebody for everything.
Yeah. And I think actors really thrive in that background. And the ways that they often contribute to the group is they're often the face of the party. They ask lots of questions, so they actually get lots of details, kind of not intentionally, but often people end up stumbling into more things that they didn't know because of that social interaction, especially if you have a DM who's really tuned into what the actor is doing. They remember NPCs. They're like the ones that they're engaged with, they never forget those. And they are always engaged in role play because the enjoyment for them comes out of the social interaction, which is really cool. And you need someone like that in the party who's willing to, those people can be also really important to drive role play, especially if there is like a not necessarily a stale moment, but like a moment that could like have a really nice role play opportunity. Actors are often one of the first people to get in there and create stuff where there is none, which is really cool. Actors can often get lost in small details, though. They will get sucked down rabbit holes of stuff with social characters to the point where they may miss bigger things that might be more important. They may hog the spotlight, but often unintentionally. It's simply because they're having fun, and they often forget that there's other people in the room for just a little bit. And I was reading one paper, and they put this quote in there, and I love it, so I'm going to throw it in there. Boring characters are still boring no matter how much you like them. So you as an actor may love your character and be so invested in it, but if your character's boring, it's boring, and no amount of acting can act you out of that. So yeah. So actors go well with explorers because they love to share experiences and learning, and actors are also natural storytellers, so they go well with storytellers too, and we'll talk about that in a second. Actors do not go well with power gamers. Absolutely not. They are playing opposite games, and they will get eternally frustrated with each other at the table. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So that's the actor. And as someone who got actor on that quiz, does that feel like that hits some buttons for you, Sean?
Yeah, I fuck with all of that.
It felt like we were just describing Sean.
I mean, I also love a good, like, one of my whole things is having narratives make out with mechanics. So the only thing that ruffled my jimmies there was like, yeah, fucking rules light system. I was like, no, let's have an even more complicated system to support the fucking look. All I'm saying, 5e is great. 5e is great. I'm not gonna like champion 4e right now.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish that
right now.
Right now. That's for later. That's for another time.
I'm never gonna not carry that torch, but it's behind my back right now. I just wished I was talking to, I can't remember who, but like, I just wish that narrative stuff in 5e like had as much mechanical development as combat, and was as interesting, because so often, like, what Tim is so wonderful, because so many of us are just wonderful storytellers or actors or whatever the fuck, that it's like, oh, we just like do good role play. He's like, okay, yeah, that just succeeds. You convincing us just as a succeed. But like, if you're not this happens all the time, like characters who don't have a high intelligence playing a fucking wizard, like, oh, I can't do that. And there's a lot of people who feel like they are low charisma or like shy, and they're playing a high charisma character. It's like, I persuade that person, and you're like, well, how do you, and I am guilty of this. I'll always be like, as a DM, well, how do you persuade them? Because I want to dig into that, because that's my fucking shit. And that's the same as our like engineer DM being like, well, how do you solve the puzzle? I was like, what, you want me to do a fucking Rubik's Cube? I'm an idiot. Like, and so what that means is, if you're a low charisma person, then you just have to, I guess I just roll for it. And, if this is a combat encounter, there's going to be multiple stages of like, I'm going to get them prone and then hit them with that and then fly them up across the room. And it's very engaging. Whereas I persuade them, I rolled a 17. How's that? And that's it.
Yeah.
So like D&D, full stop, 4E, 5E, 3.5 Pathfinder. You know, I haven't tried 2 or AD. But yeah, they put a lot of onus on the role players themselves to make mechanics interesting. But if you wanted a more socially engaging system, they are out there, and you just have tried not playing D&D, as the adage goes.
There's a lot of systems out there too that run on like the Powered by the Apocalypse system, which runs on just like a 2d6 system. So everything you do runs on 2d6, and it just, whether like the degree of success. So whether it's, you know, I think you're right, Sean. I don't think the mechanics are there in D&D for social stuff. But I think something that, I mean, I see that goes, I agree with you, that goes well in this campaign is a blend of like, how do you do this versus what is the role for it dictating how that person responds, which I think is really cool.
It's great if you're playing with people who are comfortable talking and putting themselves out there. I've just been in some campaigns with some really genuinely wonderful people who just can't role play in character to save their lives, and you know, we'll be like, oh, let's share the spotlight, because actors are known to take the spotlight without realizing it, and then realizing, be like, okay, and now you talk to them, and they're like, what? Like it kills me that we can't, you know, present a social thing as a mechanical interaction that they can then thrive in.
Totally. Something I have planned on the books for a couple episodes from now is another kind of session, a show like this, where we actually talk about role play, like prominent campaigns, because I think that's something that's not necessarily unique about us here, but it is something that we're a narratively role play heavy campaign. Which is actually really different than a lot of the campaigns that are on Twitch. I'm so curious about this kind of stuff. So in some, like, if I'm ever just, you know, tootling around on the internet, sometimes I'll pop into different D&D streams and see what they're like. And I have so many thoughts on what D&D, like the culture of gaming, and why D&D is the way it is on Twitch. And like, there's stuff about how Critical Role has influenced that, but we are a narratively like driven role play heavy campaign, and that is not unique, but it comes with its own like pros and cons to a combat oriented campaign, which I think we can talk about. And I also think it's really important to throw out tips about like, maybe you're new to D&D and you want to be a good role player, or you want to engage more with role playing. So I'm hopeful that episode we can talk a little bit about role playing as a concept, and dig into that a little bit. But yeah, so actors, that's actors.
But yeah, let's talk. You said scholar or something?
Explorers is the next one on our list.
Tell me about that.
So explorers like to see new things that are interesting.
And this is archetype.
This is an archetype.
So you can be explorer style, explorer archetype.
Yes. So an explorer style would be like, this is how I interact with the world. An explorer archetype would also be like, how do you interact with people socially as well? So it's kind of a mix of both. So explorers like to see new things that are interesting. They like people and places that help them expand on details, and they help use this knowledge to make the story real. Explorers love organic. They love feeling like this is a real experience. They're best engaged by providing new experiences in game that they may not have encountered before or seen across different systems. They love detailed descriptions. Like, people love like a paragraph long. Explorers love paragraph long detailed descriptions about things. They find interesting things and rewards for exploration. So maybe they were the only one to explore that hidden cellar and they find some gold. They love that. They love that it's a reward. You know, that's what makes them happy, is getting a reward for exploring. They can contribute often to groups by finding hidden things. They revel in description text, and they often are the people who retain details. So if there was a small detail that was thrown in somewhere that people didn't think about, they're often the ones who remember it, which also makes them feel quite good and useful as well. Explorers love to feel useful. They like that their exploring is justified. But they often run into problems because they tend to chase red herrings. They often go down things where people will chase things that end up being dead ends. And they can get fixated on unimportant details. And they often feel the drive to explore unimportant areas, which can be a little bit of extra legwork for a DM, having to flesh out areas that are not necessarily important, but they know that the explorer is going to push to go towards. They go really well with thinkers. Good planning takes good knowledge. So explorers and thinkers go really well together. And they do not go well with instigators. Instigators tend to blow past important information or interesting subjects, which aggravate the explorer to no end. So that's an explorer. Which brings us.
We haven't talked about instigators yet.
No,
but
we're going to talk about them
type
right now. Instigators
great.
like to get shit done.
Hell
They take
yeah.
great and often like obvious risk for the sake of advancing the party. Not even the story, just the party. They push things forward. These are folks who are best engaged by inviting them to experiment with the world, and rewarding their risky behavior occasionally, and also allowing that some reckless behavior that puts the party in a tough situation but doesn't penalize them too heavily. So like instigators are like, they're like the I kick through, open the door, and the rest of the party is trying to figure out what's happening. They're the ones who are going to kick through the door and go straight through. They often contribute most commonly to pushing the party forward and the plot forward. They're the ones who are like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and they will jump to different things to keep things moving. They hate staleness and they hate stopping. They often contribute also to a bit of unpredictability and chaos. Having an instigator in the party tends to keep things quite interesting because you're always wondering what this person is going to do in a situation, which often keeps DMs on their toes because they're having to be quite reactive and plan and like shape things around an instigator often. Problems. They may get the party killed or in grave danger. And these are what you would potentially like the canonical adage of a murder hobo. Would be fall more, which is like the negative connotation of what an instigator is. And they often have a really short attention span. So like big narrative story stuff, nah, that's not fucking important. I kick down the door. So they go really well with power gamers. They love that a power gamer has figured out how to not just kick down a door, but kick it out the most brutally, the best, the fastest, the strongest. And they really, really conflict with actors and thinkers. They think actors are dull and that thinkers are too slow. So they do not care about the social interaction, and they think that thinkers take way too long to do anything. So that's an instigator. I don't know if like, I think I'm trying to think about like I haven't played like in a lot of different groups. Yeah, I've been playing D&D for a while, but I haven't played with like many groups. So I'm hard pressed to find someone who fits as like a consummate instigator, but I know they're out there. I've heard stories about instigators. I think a lot of people out there who've played D&D for a long time or DM'd for a long time have come across instigators. Yeah. So then almost on like the opposite of an instigator, we have an observer. So they're potentially shyer and quieter. They're often very adept at noticing things that are missed and ongoing dynamics in the group. So these people are really high monitoring. They're thinking about what's happening in the party, the way that the party is existing in the world, but they may be shyer and quieter and not the first people to jump in. They are often best engaged by asking them direct questions. Don't force them to do more than they're comfortable with, and accept that this is how they do. Accepting that someone might be a more quiet player or might be shyer or not necessarily have moments where they're not going to be the first person to jump in. And even when you toss the ball to them, they may not take it right away. And just accepting that that's how they are is often a good way to work with them. They often take advice and suggestions really easily, which can be really helpful in party. They're often like someone who is very much a calming presence in the party, because they're very much the first people to be like, hey, like, let's try, like, oh, this person suggested this. Well, that person suggested this. Let's do this. So they're not necessarily inserting something first, but they will pick and choose and kind of help integrate the group. They enjoy the company of other people, like the players in the room. So they're often usually having a really good time, even if they're quite quiet. And they may fill roles that are missed by the rest of the party. Say the party doesn't have a healer. This person will be like, yeah, okay, I'll play a healer, or a cleric or whatever. Or they'll be like, oh yeah, we don't have a tank. Oh yeah, sure, I'll play that person. So they're often quite easy, and will be less like pushy about things that are important to them. Problem, yeah, Sean.
As long as we're like talking about things that 5e can do better.
Yeah.
I remember I've played with one or two observers And it's so funny because what I always see happening with observers is they are drawn to combat light characters, like classes, like they don't want to play fighters. But I've also found that often observers have a fairly undeveloped sense of the mechanics, because and so the problem there is all the support classes in D&D are casters.
Spell heavy,
and mechanically complicated. Yes.
You want to play a druid because they're like of the earth and super light and like, oh, I just like my birds or whatever the fuck. Like, that's cool. Druids are one of the most mechanically engaged.
Complex. Yes.
There needs to be, and maybe we need to homebrew it or something, because this needs to exist, a non-caster support class. Like, I don't know what that looks like because I've never even thought of it before, where it's like, oh, you just want to help people? Here are a couple options for that. That's like as complicated as a barbarian, but for people who don't just want to hit things.
Yes.
Like,
I think that's a really good point too. I think,
like the nice
totally
rogue. Then, because rogues are all like, oh, I'm a skill monkey. I can do anything.
Yeah.
And I stab. What if it was I can do anything and I hug? Or, you know, whatever.
I think something that
is.
that unearthed that I'm seeing coming out of Unearthed Arcana right now, and even the stuff that they've put in Xanathars, is kind of like that. They're taking more not necessarily like they're taking more technical classes, but making like less technical subclasses. They're kind of paring them down a bit, which I really like. Like, I really love something that I really like is the Circle of Dreams or the Circle of the Shepherd Druid. Because they're quite pared down, because Circle of the Moon is so complicated and you have so many different wild shapes that you can go into, and then all of that kind of stuff mechanically. But Circle of Dreams and Circle of the Shepherd is like less. There's a bit, or even the Circle of the Land. I think that's a really under. People always shit on it, but it's great. It's my
Circle of the Land is just the best.
It's
like,
so
solo
good.
class.
It's so good. But people are always like, no, I
overpowered.
pick Circle of the Moon, and I'm like, no. Circle of the Land is way better.
Circle of the Land is the barbarian druid.
Yes.
Yes,
100%.
The point is, it's like, but not for killing.
Yeah, but not for killing. Exactly.
Anyways, that's
so
my little derail.
A real medic, like someone who does like medical stuff the old school way.
You want to talk about underutilized
a doctor?
Feats?
Yeah,
the fucking medic class.
I heal you by sewing you, or
the healer class is unreal.
Yes,
where it's just like, oh yeah, you can just fucking do it.
Creates healing salves and stuff like that, and like uses healing kits and like, that's so cool.
It's already there. It's just not as good as healing casters and not as evocative as for first-time players, despite it being mechanically simple. The only people who I've ever seen genuinely interested in the healer feat are like old hands, where they're like, I've killed everything under the sun, so I'm playing. And there's an idea of my actual brother, and I thought it was great. An arcane trickster surgeon, and his whole thing is he's not a trickster, but he has an extra hand that he's super proficient with.
Oh my
with
gosh,
the mage hand.
I love that.
And so like he doesn't really cast or anything. It's just an excuse to be better at surgery. And I was like,
and then that's a thing where narratives and mechanics kiss. That's right. And we love that here. We love that on chatWater. We love the narratives and the mechanics.
I'm gonna have fucking that's a tattoo I'm gonna get all over my
two
body.
hands doing this.
Just two hands doing this.
Or just like narratives, mechanics.
Just together. I love it. So
that's how I'm gonna do it.
Observers are often easily distractible, though, and don't necessarily have the potentially investment that a lot of people do. Like some at their worst. Observers are easily distractible. They may require help and guidance a lot. They may not invest in their character and may choose they may not care to improve with that. They may be like, yeah, I play D&D, but they're like fair weather D&D folks sometimes at their worst. They're good with most other archetypes because they just kind of tend to fill a space that is missing. They conflict with power gamers hugely because power gamers often get frustrated at their lack of investment and lack of knowledge. And power gamers often tend to push stuff onto an observer when they really don't want that and really makes them uncomfortable. So that can be hard too. So speaking of power gamers, let's talk about power gamers. Power gamers get a really bad rap. And I I have a lot of respect for people who power game, because it means that these people are like, they're often encyclopedic about their knowledge with the system, because they have to be, and they like to use it and not necessarily abuse the system, but they like to use it to their advantage. And that's great. That's fucking awesome. I think that there is a space at a table for someone who really, really enjoys that stuff. And they often enjoy mechanical rewards. So my good rolls do this, or my fantastic build gets me this. They often prefer combat to social encounters, because they get to show off their big shiny toys, which is the character that they built. So power gamers often best engage by offering new items or money as rewards, and encourage potentially, you can also really engage a power gamer at a table by offering them the possibility of using more like new or niche character options. So like letting them play test an Unearthed Arcana class or something along those lines, and situations in which like allows their characters to show off all their best tricks, and also when role play is generally straightforward and short. A consummate power gamer would prefer if there's very little role play, or that the role play is much more mechanical, that allows them to roll and use their stats to get through a role play situation. Power gamers can often keep the party alive. They're really, really good at keeping the party alive, because they are often built to the fact that they cannot be killed. their builds are so good that they cannot be killed. They often help other people build characters, and help them create effective characters if that's something they're looking for. And they have excellent rules knowledge, which they're often willing to share at the table, which can be great in situations where that is wanted and wished for. Problems. They may become more powerful than the rest of the party, which can lead to resentment and frustration on parts of the other players and the DM. The DM can often get really frustrated with power gamers. They also may distract from the role play or social encounters, because they're itching to get into combat and itching to get in a position where they can show off their tricks. They grow, and they also often grow bored with characters that they've created who do not meet their expectations. So potentially they've created this character that they think is going to work really well in this situation, and then they don't, and are often quick to just be like, yeah, no, fuck this character, I'm gonna kill them off, because this character doesn't matter to me, because the story doesn't matter about this character, the narrative is not necessarily important, it's the stats, it's the build, and I'm gonna build something better to try it again. And they often have combat first approaches, so they would be the first person to charge into combat, where potentially diplomacy might be used better instead, or a situation that actually is structured to call for diplomacy, they would likely be someone to push for combat. And these
also,
are not... Go ahead. No, go ahead.
In character creation, what is the build that I want to make first, and then what character fits that?
Yes.
Which I have become less and less enchanted by
it can be quite
as the
enchanting.
years go by.
Yeah, it can be quite enchanting for sure. The call for like a really great build that works well in combat is like so alluring, and especially if you're at a combat oriented table with other combat oriented power gamers. Power gamers love to play well with other power gamers, because it's often like, oh man, that's a sweet build. Like they're often really respectful and quite like enamored with other folks who build great, statted out, kick-ass, I'm gonna bash this door in characters. They're awesome, and when they play together, they can create like really fantastic, interaction. Synergies through combat, and I think that's fantastic. And when done well, it's beautiful to watch. People who know the game, statted themselves out correctly, and just like execute stuff perfectly. That's great. That's great. I have a lot of respect for power gamers, because they've actually put in a lot of time and investment into this character, even if it's not narrative, if that makes sense. So they're really good with instigators and thinkers. They appreciate tactical folks who get things done. And they conflict a lot with actors and storytellers, because they think these people, they don't find necessarily any value in the story. It's more about what's going to happen to my like build. What things am I going to get to make my character better, my stats better, is often what one of the consummate power gamer would be concerned about. Yeah. So I've got some stuff about power gamers in a second when they get problematic. We'll talk about when things get problematic in a second, but that's kind of the power gamer archetype. Everyone knows a power gamer. Everyone knows one. Everyone has played with one at a table. You know, they're quite easy to kind of it's a different feeling, especially when you're at like a table that is more narratively focused. You're like, oh, that person is exceedingly stats oriented and combat first. Much respect for that.
I think it's super common, especially because a lot of people come to D&D from video games.
Yes.
Where, you know, the type of role playing we do in D&D isn't really possible with the tech that we have with video games, unless it's like an MMO, in which case it's interacting with a person.
Yeah.
But like, you just can't have this kind of improv with something. So that means if you're coming from something like Skyrim, like, which is like a pretty D&D genre type things, it's like you're building a character. It's like, oh, how do I express my character through mechanics?
Yes.
And it's like,
absolutely.
And so a lot of people who find D&D, they're like, they are trained in power gaming because that is the medium of video games lends itself to that. And they have to sort of unlearn some of those behaviors to be welcome at more tables.
I think that's a really good point, to be welcome at more tables. If a power gamer stumbles into a table of other power gamers with a DM who also can support a bunch of power gamers, or potentially might be a war gamer DM archetype, which we will talk, chatWater will get there. That's just beautiful. There is a couple really good Twitch streams out there that are combat oriented and really like the DM is also like has power gamer tendencies, playing with a group of power gamers, and it's awesome. It's very cool. It can be cool for like more narrative oriented DMs to often get tips about tactical combat and improve their combat encounters. But the role play or the narrative is quite minimal. So you don't go there for if you're a role play or narrative oriented person, you might not enjoy those streams so much, or might not enjoy this game so much. So we have two more of these archetypes. So there's thinkers. So thinkers like to plan. They enjoy puzzles and logic problems. When they're engaged in combat, these are like tactical folks in combat. They enjoy looking at all of the minutia of the way that things work. They're going to want to know. They're going to want to know stats and stuff like that, but only so that they can plan how things are going to move. They want to see all the moving pieces together. They may not necessarily make the best, like biggest, baddest character, but they respect that kind of person has a place in the party. They're best engaged by making encounters that require forethought and planning, interesting puzzles, traps, or riddles. They are actually really helpful at keeping the party alive through good decision making, because they're often the voice of sober second thought. They're the person that is going to be like, wait, have we actually thought this through before we go do this, before we kick down that door, because we all apparently think that kicking down that door is a good idea. Is this actually a good idea? Is there another way that we could do this? And they're really good at keeping track of resources. They're often the first person to know how much gold the party has. Do we have enough rations? All of that kind of stuff. Are we kitted out? Do we need all of these things for this adventure? And they often play specialist characters and know them very well, because they realize that these characters need to like support if everything's going to shit, and it's like a position where they could be the TPK. The thinker is going to be the one who has already thought about this, pre-planning their next 3 moves depending on like all of the different things that could go wrong. Thinkers make fantastic leaders in a party. However, they can become paralyzed by indecision, because they see all the options and they may see more than one good one that could be equally good, and this can be quite paralyzing to a thinker. And they often waste time over planning for things they don't need to plan for. They're really, really good with power gamers, especially when approaching specific challenges and particular combat, but they conflict with instigators, especially when the thinker is a prominent member in the party. Because if a thinker is kind of this leader of the party, and you've got one of your party members who is just kicking down door after door after door and not actually stopping to listen to your plans, that's going to get pretty frustrating, and could also throw off all these other plans and all of these other contingencies that the thinker has plans for. Yes, Sean.
classic DM trick, how to deal with that, because more often than not, instigators play characters with high survivability. Yes. Barbarians, or even rogues, because they have like roguish avoidance or whatever, where it's like, your traps cannot affect me. If you ever just really want to fuck up an instigator and be like, yo, you need to settle it down, have them trigger a trap that hurts the rest of the party instead.
Ooh.
Because instigators will like, haha, I'm knocked out. Like, I guess that happens when you kick down doors. But if you like threaten someone else's like character with permadeath as a result of your instigation, that'll sober them up right quick.
Yes, thinkers would get so aggravated and so frustrated if like someone who is like part of their master kind of like plan of the way that things work, if their plans get thrown off by an instigator, like there's like that situation that you're saying, that would like drive a thinker up the wall. And they would like try to contingency plan around, and that like the thing with thinkers is they tend to start planning if someone is not operating in the way that makes sense to them or that they think fits in with the plan, they will actually start like planning that person out of things, or they'll start planning around that person to be like, yeah. This person's got a bubble of all of the shit that they could throw over here. We're just going to do this because this will contingency plan for this person over here. So thinkers and instigators tend to really butt heads. At least with a power gamer, a thinker can accommodate for that and be like, you know your shit, you know what's going on. I know that you're going to do this, and this because these are all your abilities and you know them so well. Instigators are too unpredictable for a thinker to kind of keep a handle on. And then finally, we have storytellers. So storytellers are ready to take part in epic adventures and experience stories told through an RPG. They enjoy bonding with the world and watching it develop and grow around them as they grow with it. So they're best engaged by big arcing narratives that tie in journey and have a why to them. Storytellers love a why. They need a drive and a motivation for like everything that's happening in the world. They really enjoy multiple threads and conflict that occur at simultaneously. So they get to see all of these story arcs that are happening. They love the ability to have narrative moments of storytelling, whether for themselves or to observe that in party, the people around them. One of the biggest pros of a storyteller is that they actually get to see the big picture because they think of it as like a book. They may not know the ending, but they're thinking about like the narrative arcs. They're thinking of like the climax of the story. They're thinking of like what's going to happen after. They're looking for, they keep the story moving because they're looking for plot points. They're looking for like markers in the story to be like, this is happening, and then this is happening, and then this is happening, moving on a chapter by chapter basis, an arc by arc basis of how the story unfolds. Storytellers, however, get really frustrated when things don't go as quickly or as smoothly as they wish. The story might not be satisfying to them, or it doesn't live up to their expectations. That can be really, storytellers tend to have really high expectations for narrative, especially if they are like experienced like game D&D or RPG players. They often have a really high standard for what the story should be like and can get disappointed if things don't live up to that, or if other people contribute in ways that don't make the story not live up to that in their eyes. That can get really hard for storytellers. They go really well with actors and thinkers, because they love watching the actor play out this, engage all these social people, because that's creating story and plot hooks. They love watching the thinker plan because they too are planners, but in different ways. And they conflict mostly with power gamers, because even instigators can push a story forward and have good narrative arcs, but power gamers, when storytellers interact with power gamers, they feel like story moments are lost, because storytellers don't give a shit about being the biggest and best mechanical character, because they're more there for the story and the growth and the development of this person on a, like if they never got into conflict, that would probably be, like for a consummate storyteller, that would probably be fine. And that infuriates a power gamer. They're like, why don't you like that? Why is that unimportant to you? So those are the kind of player archetypes that we often see in D&D games. And I think they're fascinating. I myself identify probably most as a storyteller and an actor, but also have stuff from thinkers, and an explorer as well. But I think most prominently, I'm like storyteller or an actor. And something that I found really interesting is so is our community. Our community, the people who answered these quizzes, are primarily storytellers and actors, which is why if you've stumbled onto our stream and you like what we're doing, congratulations. Most of us are storytellers and actors as well.
It's funny because obviously I would have pegged Sean as an actor for sure. There's few other ones that fit him as well. But I definitely would have pegged you for a thinker.
Me?
Yeah, just knowing like your attention to lore, and you have a very specific like subclass of healing and like a very specific task. that your character has, and like you just fit that one. I mean, of course, everyone is a compilation of all of them.
Yeah.
But that's the one I would have pegged you for. So I was interested that that's the one you don't see yourself as. Like you see yourself as a little bit, but not
a little
the main
bit.
one.
But if I think about like myself, sure, I like planning and I like lore, but what is lore if not a story?
Yeah, it's true.
So I am drawn to the story as like if Blackwater was a novel, I'd be there on fucking opening night, just being like, give me fucking more chapters. I would be like the person who wants
you're
the story.
writing that book.
I know.
Like when it comes out, you will be there because you will be signing the copy.
Copies, yes.
It's funny. One of my favorite things about D&D, and I've often said, is that D&D changes depending who you play it with.
Yes.
And while I've always like generally like group dynamics is a big part of that, I'm very excited to get into how this relates to DMs. I worry that we may not have time tonight, and that I think probably should be its own session.
Probably, yes.
But like, I'm even thinking of the people I've played with and how they DM and how I DM and how my predilections as a player encourage a certain play style.
Yes.
And so like, I'm so like, I would love to see the disastrous one shot is if we got some fucking like hotshot DM from the internet who's like a power gamer, and they did a one shot with us.
They'd hate
and
that.
Like what that would even be like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He would have such a big like story arc that he would think you would get through in the time allotted in a one shot, and you guys would get stuck in like this bubble right here.
So your son didn't get into grad school? That's really rough.
We gotta fucking throw you know that.
Wait, I have a scholar thing. I know the dean. I'm gonna cast sending to the dean
right now. Yeah.
Where are you?
And alternatively, like if we were to, if like I say, like I think something Tim is really quite good at is I think his background in like improv and his just sense as a very like emotionally attuned person and someone who is aware of the way that people play together, is he's very good at crafting situations that kind of encourage people's styles and archetypes to play well together. Because he, like, I even think of things in like the money hole that we're in. There's bits and pieces for everyone. Everything in there is like meticulously crafted to pull at someone, because of course Kokanee was going to be the one to lockpick that box. Like, of course he was. So like there's just bits, like I think it's really cool to watch. We have a lot of skilled DMs at our table, and I think all of you have such fantastic skill at like being able to pull people in and create situations that make everyone feel like they're a good D&D player and that we're playing good D&D. I think we just see it often because Tim's the one running the game.
Yeah, I think Tim. I think we've talked about it before, but Tim's biggest, like, one of his best strengths is his ability to facilitate the game that everyone wants to play personally.
Yeah.
So like
totally.
everyone, whatever you get out of it, he gives you that opportunity to enjoy it. And because everyone's enjoying it, the synergy is better amongst everyone. So, you know, Sean gets his NPCs and M gets her lore, and like everyone gets the things that nourish them as a RPG player, as a Dungeons and Dragons player. The interesting thing for me talking about these archetypes is I'm kind of like a combination of two polar opposites. When I started, and Sean can attest to this, like I was a heavy power gamer in like a weird way where like for me, I thought that the best way to play and the best way to get enjoyment out of it was to be the hero of the story. And so you're the hero when you're the strongest. So I built a character who was like impossibly strong or impossibly
very effective at what he did.
Very effective at killing things. But then I'm also very much a storyteller, and like I wanted him to have like this great epic hero's journey story arc. And I basically realized that I can't be both, even though I enjoy both. You can't make him the hero at the beginning and then expect him to have an arc. So like
preach.
So basically, like in that campaign, I basically took the character and I went to the DM who was Adam, and I said, make him a new character. Like just take away everything. Like hand me something that I then play, but that I'm not going to be tempted to power game. Because otherwise I'll just power game it. Like I'm too much of a, like there's a thinker in me that goes, how can I best make this work to my advantage? And I needed someone to just be like, no, this is the guy you're going to play, enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, but I still feel that when I create a character, I literally have to stop myself from creating the hero of the story from the get-go, because it's
right.
just,
and you say hero in the context of the strongest, most effective character who's going to
yeah,
save the
like
day. Yeah.
I read a lot of like your classic fantasy novels. Like I create your Randall Thors from Wheel of Time. Like I create your Aragorns. Like I want to be the guy who's like the quintessential hero's journey hero. But I start them at I start the beginning of the journey as already the hero. That's like in my mind, I build it.
Now, in your defense, that was, correct me if I'm wrong, like your first D&D character.
It was, but it hasn't changed the impulse.
Look, no. Let me be very clear. As I think, I've got my 1,000-day stamp as far as D&D goes. That never goes away. Let me to be clear, and because there's some parallels to letters here. My first character I ever played was a barbarian called Sherman Shitwrecker, who is very much instigatory, who just wanted to jump and smash things, and carried around an NPC who he was a bad guy, and then we tied up, and friend is a very generous way to describe their relationship, but that impulse to be like, haha, let's break stuff, let's be big and wild, that never goes away. We are always still our baby selves. The more we play D&D is the more we realize that is always going to be there. You're probably always going to kind of play heroes, and how can we create jazz with that? How can we put a twist on it? And I just have to say, in relation to to put a little more context on that story, that campaign was so much fun because basically there was 3 of us. We technically had 4 players, but one was just never around, and so it was myself, and an observer, and Yanis. And so Yanis is very power gamed character, can deal out 100. Callie deals out a lot of damage,
but nothing compared to me at level 9.
Salad at back in the day was dishing out 150 damage in a turn was nothing for Kale. And then there was me playing a Claire Locke who did not take Agonize, who didn't even take a fucking Eldritch Blast. I was like, I'm gonna take a Warlock and not take Eldritch Blast because everyone does. And then we just had an observer who was just a straight up fucking Warlock, but didn't really know how to monopolize on her damage. So Adam building these things, he had to account for one character who was impossible to kill and impossible to stop, another character who was mechanically not really functional, but a functional player, and another character who could turn it on when she needed to, but was inconsistent whether she would. It was an impossible situation.
You hindered yourself by deciding that you would have less health than you should. So at one point we were level 7 and you had 40 hit points because you would lose health as you leveled up until we completed because it was a curse that made you be dying.
I didn't think
you had 40 hit points, and so Adam had to build a monster that could withstand me dealing out 300 damage in a turn, and who couldn't get hit once by this monster.
Jeez.
And no one in the party that could heal.
No, I could heal, but I'd go down first.
It was just,
and I think having DMs who can effectively manage player archetypes come to the table is such, and we'll definitely probably not have time for talking about GM stuff when we will revisit that.
Give them something to come back for. Tickle the balls.
chatWater. We'll get there at some point. Come back, please. But yeah, I think DMs who can effectively manage that it's in watching that happen is watching just a masterpiece, because you're watching this one person who has such confident knowledge of the story that they're crafting and the world that they've created around these people, that they know that these player styles and these player archetypes are all going to exist and these people are going to have fun, which is pretty cool. And I think that's the feeling I get from watching very skilled DMs is just like, oh, ooh, that looks like a fun game to play in. And I always feel a little bit of a like, that's a person I would want to play for, which is really cool. And I think that there's a DM for every table and a table for every player, which is really awesome.
It goes back to something, it's an expression I heard you use first, which is don't yuck someone's yum. And
don't yuck someone's yum.
And I think
Absolutely.
it's so important because, and I'm 100% guilty of this. There was once a player that I played with that didn't play the same style as me, and I was very quick to be like, that's not the right way you play D&D.
Yeah.
And the more I've gotten to, like, the more I've grown as a player and the more I've seen and experienced, I've been like, you know, it wasn't a good fit for us.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean there's no wrong way. And I think that's something that like, it's instinctual in us to want to be like, I know what's right and you don't know what's right. It's a weird sort of like thing we have as human beings. Mm-hmm. But like, if you play in a group and you like you watch Critical Role and you're like, that's awesome, or you watch us and you're like, that's awesome, and you play in a group and you don't get the same fulfillment, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you as a player. It just means that you haven't found the right group to play with yet.
Yes.
The player he's talking about is my brother, who has some pretty hard power. No, it's fine, because I wanted to talk about him, because because I love my brother as a D&D player. But
now I feel like I have to like openly apologize and say like,
you don't have
that I just misinterpreted. I didn't know enough at the time.
No. He wasn't being a dick. But like, look, here's the thing. You got to understand. Like, I've learned so much from just like knowing my brother. But like, I'm so furious about the way he designs characters, because like, he is like a power gamer explorer. His whole thing is he doesn't want to be the best. He wants to design a build that shouldn't work but does. And so he comes from like 3.5 Pathfinder, when they have like 10 billion splats. And if you wanted to make something overpowered, you just picked an archer and went straight down. Like, it wasn't easy to break. It wasn't hard to break the game. And so like, he would make a character based around, can I have a sword the size of a surfboard? Can I have a character who's just got a flamethrower? Like, can I do a guy who's sentient mold? But like, not in the way you expect. Like, that was his whole shtick. And so he comes in, joining us in 5e. It was his first time playing 5e, to like our whole group, which was a little more, quite more narrative heavy. And he had gone back to his old things where, in 3.5, multi-classing was all over the place, and everything he played was like 8 different levels of something else.
I remember I played one game with your brother. I remember that.
Yeah, and he comes in with a level 5 character with 4 different multi-classes, and it takes him, it takes him as long to get through. Like, you know, when like Lennon is counting up her dice because she's got all those dice, where she's like, I hit
40
it, and now you
dice.
just have to do math. Every turn was like that, because he's like, but it was counting bonuses, where he's like, I've got this fucking rogue thing and this barbarian thing and this, and all what he was trying to do was like, can I make a grappling class viable? And like, we talk about it, because it just fucking isn't in 5e, which is tragic. Because grappling is rad, and we all want to just play someone, or I want to play someone who just big and grabs someone. But the grappler feat is the most dog shit. And so he did this absurd thing, which just did not gel. He put all his attention into this, that the actual character, he completely shoehorned himself by creating like an extremely like
technical build.
Well, just our setting was in not Ravnica.
It was Curse of Strahd.
No, it was Curse of Strahd, but we had gone into a Magic the Gathering setting, because there is like canonical overlap between those two, like in terms of like Wizards of the Coast that had worked out with them. And so the setting we were in, he's like, I'm a local there. I know this place really well. And so he'd created like an extremely lore accurate character of just like a not adventurous place. And we're a bunch of like fucking D&D adventurers. We're from a different dimension, diddly-do. And she's like, I believe in God and nothing else, which was accurate, but just completely wrong.
Also hated magic.
Hated magic.
And like, we had a bunch of casters
in the party.
But again, like I love Magic the Gathering for its world building, and I forget where we are. It's the white and black setting with all the vampires. If you're nerdy, you know it. And so like what he did was so iconic to that setting, but it was completely wrong for the table we were sitting at. And he had no way of knowing that going in. And so he sits down and like the vibe was wrong. And I kept being like, oh, I love these people and I love my brother. Like I can, let me like, and it just wasn't. And he ended up leaving a few sessions later. Thank God.
I think that's the adage too, that like sometimes we as, you know, as players will often be like, oh, my really good friend is awesome and wants to try D&D. They should come play at our table. Good friends do not necessarily make good D&D party members, which I think says like they can absolutely, because there's that sense of trust and intimacy there. Like that's already often established. But oftentimes from like a lot of the stuff I've like read and like a lot of research out there, a lot of people find really great success with people they don't know. And they stumble in, and it's just about stumbling in and finding the right DM for you and the right party members to play with as well, which I think is so cool. And knowing that there is a table out there for your brother gives me a lot of hope.
Well, one thing in terms of like us growing as players and people, he's DMing a thing right now that sounds, oh my God, so like all that attention to detail that he puts into like playing that maybe doesn't work, when he puts it into
Works
a DMing. It's like, I want to bring him on some show because no, his secrets are mine and I will covet them. But his players are, they're all basically like writers and like writing students. And so in terms of, by the sounds of it, they're all very much like observers, bordering on thinkers, like all first-time players. And so I was like, oh, Gavin, I love this setting. I love what you're doing. I would love to play, but only if you think I'd fit the vibe. And so we were very excited. We were building the character that was going to come in. And then he had to think about it. He's like, you are too loud of a presence. Like, this is a very quiet party. And it would throw it off. And that was sort of my vibe. And so just before I even got to the table, like without even thinking of like archetypes or whatever, we identified like,
and that's a really great tool as a DM.
Working. Yeah, what you have is working
at your table.
I will throw a wrench in it because I am. It's basically a party of librarians, and I'm coming in with my fucking like xylophone, be like, like I'm playing a cat that thinks it's a person. Like, I don't know.
I think that like these archetypes as a whole are really great kind of starting points for kind of thinking about what kind of player you are, but obviously they're not the be all end all, but they can be really good at helping you suss out like, is this the right table for me? So I have, just to kind of cap off our evening, we will definitely not get to GM styles, but I have a couple little things on difficult player dynamics. So these are the more like negatively attuned stereotypes or archetypes that kind of come through when talking about D&D and RPGs. So what I've done here is talked a little bit about them, but often mostly padded this with like how to like work with this player. There's a really great, not all of this stuff is mine. I'm also coming into this from like my background as a therapist. And then I'm also taking some insight from a really awesome guy named, I think his name is Cody. He runs a pod or a YouTube channel called Taking 20. And he's fantastic. He's a very skilled DM. His stuff is really awesome. And he talked a lot about these ones and offered some tips. So I'm taking some stuff of his and bringing in some of my own stuff. So this is not all mine. Please go watch his channel and support him that way. Want to preface that with that, but I have some thoughts about these folks as well. And I'm sure the two of you do too. So rules lawyers. Rules lawyers are not inherently bad to have at the table. Like, that's not a hot take. That is just simply the truth. Their rules lawyers can be super, super helpful to have at the table, especially if in complex situations where the DM is maybe focusing more on narrative aspects and trying to keep the party engaged. A rules lawyer can be really helpful to make sure that the mechanics are running properly. Rules lawyers can also be helpful too if the DM is new, and maybe that's a conversation they have ahead of time. The problem can often arise. Yes.
it may be useful to define what a rules lawyer is.
Oh, great question. Yes, a rules lawyer is someone who is quite by the book with regard to rules. They're the first person to say, that's not how that mechanic works. What does that spell do? How much damage are you doing? No, that doesn't work that way. Or I think that it goes like this. This is what I do. Like they're more like, we'll go back to the book, like rules as written. And that is how it is. There is no room for adjustment. Homebrew rules for them are like, okay, but they prefer stuff that is rules as written and play tested. That's kind of how they more live intentionally in the rules that way. If any thoughts on rules lawyering, you two?
Oh no, I just like, before we start like how to deal with them, it's
Yes.
like maybe not everyone is at like,
Right.
everyone's met a rule lawyer if they've
Yes.
played, and not everyone has maybe played.
This is true.
Yeah. Rules lawyer is simply like, I can be a rules lawyer sometimes because I find good mechanics like motivate good narrative, because like we know what we're capable of and whatnot. And so yeah, rules lawyer are just like that. These are the rules, these are the rules, these are the rules. And sometimes they bump up against people like that.
The first thing I ever DM'd was something I DM'd for Sean, Adam, and another two friends of mine. But 3 of the people of the 4 who were in the group were also DMs. And so I basically said to them before, like, hey, if I'm wrong on something, just let me know. Because like, I'm not like, you guys know more than I do. You guys know what your characters can do. If you say that's how it works, I'm going to trust you on it.
Yeah.
But then I also had this great mechanic that I never actually ended up using with you guys, Sean, because the COVID thing happened and we stopped and everything. But I was going to have all of you get a cursed item that wasn't like something you would know what it was. Like it would be like a gold coin or something that rattled around in your bag. That when you irritated me, I could negatively affect your character and you would never know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So it would just be like, you would rules lawyer me and I would, as the DM, just be like, roll me a D20. And then you would suffer some sort of negative effect. And there's no idea why or where. You just know that if you pissed me off as the DM, there'd be some sort of negative effect.
See, I just need to massage that a little bit. That's so good, because eventually someone is gonna do like detect magic and find the coin.
Yeah.
And then we have a money hole situation where it's like,
where did this coin come from?
Who made this coin? And then suddenly someone has been plotting against us this whole time.
It's a beautiful narrative moment.
And what was initially a little like, haha, stop dicking with me as a DM, because now you've like trained us not to do that effectively, has now become, oh, that's not just me being a petty DM. Now it's like, haha, that was an actual trick to get you engaged and invested in why you fucking hate this person.
It's a reward. It's a reward.
Yeah, but I, as the DM, would not have thought that fast. You guys would have caught me with my pants down, where I go, oh, where did that coin come from? That's a great question. We're going to end the session for this week, and I'll figure out where that coin came from.
No, that's how we DM. The first time we fuck it up, but then you bring that coin back the next time and you've thought about it. That's the great part about being a DM. Usually you're DMing for different people. Anything you've already used, it's new to them. Just recycle. Anyways, go ahead, Em. What do we do about rules lawyers?
Rules lawyers.
Do we fight them? Do we punch them?
No.
Do we kick them?
No.
I think that sounds valid.
Maybe.
You don't be violent on them?
So rules lawyers often problems arise at a table for a rules lawyer when the perception of them is that they are not allowing the DM to make rulings. They're arguing with the DM at the table and disrupting the flow of the table, breaking folks out of immersion by interrupting role play for rules or derailing combat for rules, especially with the parts of the storyline or narrative that they're not in. If they start calling rules on other folks in situations that they're not in, that can really, really throw players out. And we'll talk about immersion and flow when we talk about role play and why it's really important to role-playing games. But the goal at the table is to keep it moving and to allow space for everyone at the table. So DMs can often take rules lawyers aside after the game, approach all these, and most of these situations can be managed with a little bit of empathy and a little bit of understanding, and just being like, hey, really appreciate that you've got a really awesome handle on the rules that's so helpful in this situations. Rather than saying it at the table, just message me. there's so much that can be handled with a message or a whisper of some description, whether that's like especially now over text or over Facebook or a message or whatever. Encourage them to do that in a way that doesn't derail combat, and reward them when they use when they rules lawyer in a way that is really effective and help the situation. So it's about it's positive and reinforcement. Positive reinforcement over punishment is a fantastic way to get people to do what you want.
Please take this into all aspects of your life.
Of all aspects of your life. Positive reinforcement over punishment. So the next type of person that we may potentially have a problem with at the table is the saboteur. So saboteurs are often folks who are assholes to the group for their own gain. They really revel in PC versus PC conflict. So they really, really like fucking with other characters, like the people at the table. And DMs often have very little patience for these folks. And often the players have very little patience for these folks. So these kind of players at the table often actually require like a little bit of parenting to give them set expectations for the standard of play that exists at the table, and what other people in the campaign expect, and like how they this could be even a conversation that happens like you rather than playing one night, maybe you all sit down and talk about the kind of game you want to play. What is okay? Talk about boundaries, talk about consent, which is really, really important, can be a fantastic way to like remind the saboteur and the group as a whole that other people are important and you can't just fuck up their shit because it makes you happy. Because often fucking up other people's shit doesn't actually make you happy. It's kind of like bullying and it kind of sucks.
So take this one also outside of D&D and think of many ways that you could apply that to your life.
Yes. So and also setting up opportunities for the group to actually diffuse the situation with the saboteur rather than the GM having to step in. Like letting the group do the work, because that actually will help them move through a storming phase. And now the new norm is set in place that this player versus player stuff doesn't occur anymore, or doesn't occur in the way that it was originally occurring. And the saboteur gets the insight that like, hey, maybe that behavior that I'm doing is not okay. Positive reinforcement over punishment, always. Yeah. So that's a saboteur. And considering power dynamics. If this player is attempting to have power over the other players, why is that happening? Like, why is this player trying to exert themselves and their power in the game on other people? What is going on for this player, like as a person, that they may feel like they need to push power onto other people? Is something happening in their life that maybe they need to push power over other people? They're fucking shit up because shit's going wrong in their life. Like, positive reinforcement, empathy over punishment, always. Okay, that's a saboteur. Spotlighters. Spotlighters tend to be people who either intentionally or sometimes unintentionally, everything has to be about them. Most often, this is done unintentionally. People tend to triple and stumble into the spotlight, and then they like it, and then they stay there because it feels really good to feel important. Just like generally, it feels really good to feel important. So people tend to like the spotlight. They like also the positive reinforcement that comes with being in the spotlight, because if you're in the spotlight, people see you do good stuff. People pay attention. So really important for DMs is to try and understand why a spotlighter is doing what they're doing before getting upset, before kind of jumping to negative punishment. The spotlighter will want to do everything. They're going to want to be the one who goes into that room first, to pick that lock, to investigate this thing. They're also first out the door if there's a combat. So they're going to want to do all that. Remind them that they can't do everything. Maybe instill some mechanics about timing in there that can help a spotlighter like give make other people have space for stuff too. Remind them of flow, and leaving space for other players can be really, really helpful too. And encourage interaction and connection. Remind them that they have to throw the ball to other people, and also be willing to catch the ball, and that they may not be in the spotlight all the time. Because mostly people who are in the spotlight a lot, it comes from a place of excitement about really wanting to do well and really wanting to succeed and to have other people validate them. So it usually doesn't come from a negative place. It comes from a place of wanting to feel important. And empathy and positive reinforcement for good spotlighting is really good there too, because we've all met people like this in their life and also in RPGs. So that is a spotlighter. Now, cheaters. At some tables,
Ooh, yeah.
People cheat. There we go. Wow, grammar's hard.
People's
Cheaters.
cheats.
People's cheats. Cheaters are folks who lie about roles, generally, or lie about their abilities or inflate what they can do, stuff like that. This player likely also has traits of other problem player styles like spotlighters or saboteurs, stuff like that. And helping them in that way first is often a better way than actually necessarily addressing the cheating first. You may know that someone is a cheater, but calling them out, especially publicly, that's going to get defensive real quick and cause really big problems in the situation. So often what might be helpful for a cheater is to, if there's other problem play styles that are affecting their play, try going that way first. They may not feel the need to cheat if these other things are actually addressed first. But if that doesn't work, take them aside one-on-one and let them know that you know. Don't necessarily call them out on it in a negative way. Let them know that you know and give them a chance to change. If they don't, then that's a sign that the culture of the table you're trying to hold is not important for them, and maybe this game isn't for them. Right? Like, I think you gave them the opportunity for change. You said, hey, I know you might be angry and upset, but like put your shit aside and just be like, hey man, like, hey person, please don't do that. We want to honestly at the table, if it's a thing about mechanics, if it's a thing about XYZ spotlighting, saboteuring, like let's address that stuff. But if they keep cheating at the table, then maybe this isn't the right table for them. And maybe they got bigger stuff going on, the feeling that they need to cheat on rules. Yeah, that's my thoughts about cheaters. And I'm really curious to hear about your two, and we've just got like two more. We've got a couple more. The dark side of power gaming, because there is a dark side of power gaming. These are often folks who like min-max and play powerful, super statted out characters, but the issue arises when they're the only power gamer at the table. It can be hard to balance encounters for DMs. They can move into a spotlighter position, where they take all of the spotlight, especially in conflict situations, and the other party's kind of just left. They can become way more powerful than the party really quickly, and that can cause tension and unrest in the party. So one trick with this kind of scenario with a power gamer is to acknowledge that there is an obvious, with the player, maybe one-on-one, acknowledge that there's an obvious gap between them and the player, the other players, and actually put it back on them. This was the suggestion of the guy from Taking 20, and I loved it so much. I chatted about it with Tim, and we thought it was really great. Is like put it back on them, be like, hey, you win combat. Great. Well done. You win combat. What about all of this stuff over here with role play? Can that be a challenge for you? Can we work in some way to make this a challenge for you? Let's start. So your character is amazing in all of these combat scenarios. How about what happens for them in the next rest of the story? Because the character isn't going to grow with the rest of the party if they don't grow in role play. Encourage them to look long game. Rather than encourage the player to work with you as the DM to kind of like create the story that satisfies them, in a way that also encourages the narrative, rather than just having them be a combat-oriented person. I really liked that. I thought that was a really good idea. Yeah.
Also, I find like, what you're saying, especially when it comes from places of enthusiasm, like the spotlighters and the power gamers. No one power games because they don't give a shit. You know what I mean?
They
no
give so
like,
many shits.
Oh
they give
man,
so
I just
many
showed
shits.
up. What did I do? 200 points of damage? Whatever. Like no one's that. That's like, you have to like be brain to
and they're
power
putting
game.
so much energy into that. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that and positively reinforce that rather than punish it.
And so, like just taking them aside and be like, yo, I acknowledge your fucking technical excellence.
Yeah.
And
well
you
done.
probably are already upset that the rest of the party is not at your level. Like,
This is
like,
probably
what are we
as
gonna do
frustrating
here?
for you as it is
Yeah.
for me. Like,
So like, what are our options here? Either we get these people to fucking become like you, which isn't gonna happen,
No.
or like you can adjust your style.
Mhm.
And like even Yanis, your example was so wonderful where you're like, I don't know, I have like just following my impulse of making a better character, I've written myself into a corner of being like a killing machine that then the only way that you, the DM, can deal with me is by like basically stun locking me so I can't play, and that's not fun for either of us.
That's exactly what happened. Is like the only mechanic that Adam could use to make the interactions challenging as for the group and not just for me was to basically incapacitate Kale. And so we got to a point where I was frustrated because I wasn't getting to play because I was spending most of my time incapacitated.
And play in the way that you would want to play.
Exactly. And so we basically had a conversation where I was like, something needs to change because I'm not like, and I also came to a realization that games are generally more fun. And it's kind of the thing I've talked to Matt about quite a bit, because it's very much Matt's style of play is it's more fun when you are there to support other characters than when you're trying to be the center of the attention. It's more fun to be involved in other people's stories and to be like, I think it's pretty safe to call it like, be the Scanlan of the group, because that was such a perfect, like, he ended up being almost the hero by never actually being the hero. Like he was always just there with the little things to save the day. But I think one thing that's an important note on all of this stuff, and I think it's something that I'm realizing more as we do this show, is a D&D group is very much like a relationship or a family thing. Like it is good to think about these things, and it's good to have conversations with your group out of character about like what you get out of it and like what's going on, and like outside of this, so you have understanding of where people are coming into the session with and that kind of thing. Because I don't know about other groups, but I don't know if that's something that's commonly done in groups. And I know that's something that we do and sort of take for granted almost, because it's just everyone is friends. But I think that's something that all groups can benefit from like, be conscious of like what kind of gamer you are, be conscious of like what you look to get out of the game. Like put some thought into that, because I think it'll help everyone either make that tough decision of like, you know what, now that I've thought about it, this isn't for me. And like, or, maybe you can handle things differently to make it more enjoyable. But I think it only comes from self-reflection, and it only comes from group reflection.
Absolutely. I think that is that sentence right there is like the quintessence of if there's anything that you take away from this episode of Chatwater, it's consider how you play, consider the group that you're in and the dynamics you have and what you're looking to get out of the game, because those may not line up, and that is okay. It just means you might have to find a different table. Because like group dynamics is so inherent to the way that we exist, just like in life as humans, but also to the what we bring to our play. Because in role play, like, we are looking to emulate and replicate real human interaction, like real interaction that we have out in the world. We're looking to just transpose that into another setting and feel all of those good feelings that we get out there, while also managing to be like these beautiful, wonderful heroes with fantastic story arcs who get to kick the crap out of things every now and again. So like, we get to live out these amazing adventures that we would never do in real life. But to do that, we need other people. We can't do that alone. You can play one-on-one D&D, but like the best D&D is enjoyed as a group, where you get to champion other people and their experiences in the game, and the hallmark of collective storytelling, which in itself is just an ultimate human experience, telling stories with other people, which is really cool. And I have other problem players, but that seems like a fantastic point to just like end the episode. We can talk this about that shit the other time. Yeah, that's what you take. We'll get there. Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I encourage everyone to like make sure, positive reinforcement over negative. Make sure you're
Always.
thinking about your group.
Empathy. Yes.
And what's going to make for the happiest, most fun D&D, and whatever that means to you and your group. But thanks for joining us. Come watch us play on Saturday night.
Yes.
It's going to be awesome. We left it on quite the cliffhanger, as Tim is wont to do.
And speaking of Tim, next Monday, Tim is joining us on chatWater for a fantastic DM AMA. So if you have any questions for Tim that you want answered, we've had a bunch come in through the Instagram, but if there's anything that you want him to answer specifically in these last couple minutes here, throw them up with a hashtag chatwater in the chat, or you can post them on Saturday, and we'll likely also post a thing on our Instagram. Please send your questions in for him. Ask him anything regarding D&D or life, whatever his choice, whether he can answer them or not. Yeah, John.
Also, our session this Saturday is a very special one.
It
for
is
2 reasons. The first one being that not our, it's episode something 25, but,
which is a pretty awesome episode unto itself,
because that is 1/4 of 100. And it's actually 100. It's our 100th session playing together. So come Saturday to see our 100th session, and come see Matt roll up a new character, which we haven't actually seen happen on stream yet.
But we have seen happen numerous times.
Yes.
Because Kokanee Buckwild is dead now.
No, he's not.
Torrin.
Shut your mouth.
He's gone.
He's
gone.
So this Saturday, 100th episode, bring your jorts.
Yes.
Bring your dad, so any parental figure that you would like.
Yes, please. And come join us for our 100th 100th session together as a party. Gosh, our centennial. I'm so excited. It's going to be great.
And you guys can guess about which character type each player is, and you can postulate on how all they fit together to make such a wonderful, cohesive group. I definitely, as I was doing them, was pondering what I thought everyone was.
Oh, I'm so curious to hear your thoughts.
And thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys Saturday night.
Baby.